Hello and welcome back to the Hughes Enterprises channel. This is Chapter 7 in the 327 Federal Magnum series, and today we're going to be talking about duplicating factory ballistics while reloading. And specifically, the load that we're going to be duplicating today is the Bufalo Bore Heavy 327 Federal. Now if you look online for personal defense ammo in 327, this is by far the most common loading. The Federal 85 grain hydra shok isn't terribly common, but this Bufalo Bore ammo is everywhere. The problem with it is it's very expensive. It's $30.18 for a box of 20. It's over $1.50 a round. And I can't afford that, so I'm going to reload it. Now, duplicating factory ballistics is one of the key skills of the reloader. And the first thing we have to do is determine what their load even is. Now, without any in front of me, we're going to have to look at their data and their pictures to find out what the load is. So we can see it's a heavy 327 Federal, and they appear to be using a jacketed hollow point, which is what it says. It's a 100 grain jacketed hollow point. Looking at the picture, I can tell that's a Hornady XTP, and I have 100 grain Hornady XTPs, so that's not going to be a problem. And in their description, it says that they are using a flash suppressed powder. Now, there are a number of different flash suppressed powders they could be using, such as Accurate number 9 or CFE pistol, which is what I have on hand. And then comparing their actual chronograph velocities between different barrel lengths, they're not gaining all that much velocity with the increase in barrel length. So that tells me they're probably not using a Magnum pistol powder like Accurate number 9. So instead, I believe they're using something like CFE pistol. So that's what I'm going to use to try to duplicate their load. Other things that we can observe is that they're not using nickel-plated brass. So the brass will corrode over time, so not a huge deal. We're using American Eagle brass, the Federal, once fired. And they're also loading their XTP to where the case crimps at the top of the cannelure, so that's going to set our overall length. So really all we have to do is look down here, and Bufalo Bore is really good about this, most manufacturers aren't, that they actually list the actual guns that they fire the rounds in and give us real world velocities. So in their 3-inch barrel, Ruger SP101, they're getting 1,315 feet per second. So that's a perfectly respectable number, and I think that is well within the realm of possibility of loading with CFE pistol. Let's get this set up and start to develop this load. Now, from Bufalo Bore's website, they don't give us any hints as to what primers they're using in here. So we're going to have to make an educated guess and make a decision on what primers to use. Now, I know that Bufalo Bore loads their ammunition as hot as possible. And so to handle that pressure, I am assuming that they're going to be using CCI primers, because it's somewhat known, or known to many reloaders, that CCI primers tend to be a little thicker than Federal primers, and so they handle pressure a little bit better. So I would assume that they're probably using CCI brand primers. And besides CCI, they're using either small Magnum pistol or small rifle primers. Now, that's a topic for another video, small pistol Magnum versus small rifle, but we're using small pistol Magnum today. I think that's going to be pretty close to what they're using. We've got all of our brass resized and primed, and the process that we're going to be using to develop the load is we're going to start at a starting load and gradually work our way up to a maximum load, or to the point where we are matching the advertised velocity of 1,315 feet per second. Now, that may be prior to the maximum load, and we may never reach this advertised velocity. So this is going to be the load process, and how are we going to find out? So our starting load comes from the Hodgdon website for CFE pistol in the 327 Federal with the 100 grain Hornady XTP. They recommend a starting load of 5.9 grains. Now, we're going to start at 6 just for the sake of making the numbers a little easier. We're going to start at 6 grains and work up by 0.2 grains at a time to Hodgins' recommended maximum load, which is 7.0 grains. And we're going to do that again in 0.2 grain increments. So we're going to go from 6, 6.2, 6.4, 6.6, 6.8, etc. up to 7. So let's get into charging these cases and move on to the next step. Okay, so we have our first set of 6 cartridges all loaded up. And these are our first charge weight, which is 6 grains. And here's the most important part, is taking these cartridges and having them segregated by charge weight. We don't want these getting mixed up, because that's going to ruin our results. And we're spending a lot of time doing this. You want to only do it once and do it right. So we're going to keep those in their own individual Ziploc, and we're going to have one Ziploc per charge weight. This is going to keep everything separate and keep the test accurate. The other thing that I want to touch on is that we're doing 6 cartridges for each charge weight, and there's a reason for that. It's because we have 6 different chambers on our Ruger SP101 that we're going to be shooting these in. Now you may be thinking, well, all the chambers are the same, they're all bored with the same tool. Well, there are minute little differences between the chambers, and I've noticed that on 1 or 2 chambers they're just a hair tighter than the other ones, and they will show pressure signs before the other ones. So the reason why we're doing 6 is so we can populate all of those chambers, and we're not developing a load for our looser chambers that may prove to be dangerous or excessive in our tighter chambers. I will also be using these loads in my Smith & Wesson 632, but based on prior reloading experience, I know that my 632 can handle much higher pressure loads without showing excessive pressure signs compared to the SP101. Okay, we just finished loading up all of our 327 cartridges for the 100 grain XTP, trying to match our Bufalo Bore Ballistics. And let's make some predictions about these before we go out and shoot them. So the 6 grain loading is going to be somewhere around 28 to 30,000 psi. That's low pressure compared to the 45,000 psi the 327 normally operates at. So this is going to show us a couple things in terms of pressure signs. The primers are still going to be rounded. They're going to have rounded edges. You have nice round primer strikes. The cases are going to be slightly sooted up and black because the cases aren't expanding all the way to fit the chamber. So you're going to have a little bit of blow-by and blackened cases. Now, what I predict is somewhere probably around 6.6 grains, we're going to hit about the 38 to 40,000 psi range, which is what typical Magnum cartridges operate at, like the 357-44 Magnum. They're going to be about 38,000 psi or so, and that's when our smoky cases are going to start going away, and we're going to start to see the rounded edges of the primer starting to flatten out and get a little more sharp. Now, reading pressure signs is all about experience and understanding the difference between high pressure and excessive pressure without a pressure test gun is all based on visuals, touch and feel, and your experience. So before you go out and start developing a load, go and shoot some regular factory ammo so you can see what that looks like and what that feels like. So you can see what high pressure looks like at 45,000 psi versus excessive pressure, which is any sign that is beyond normal. Now as we go up in charge weight up to 6.8 and 7 grains, we're going to start to see the primers get even more flat, but what we don't want to see is for the primers to go beyond flat and square edged. We don't want the primers to start flowing out into the rest of the primer pocket. That's a sign that we've gone too far. The other thing we don't want to see is for any unusual spikes in velocity. Any velocity that's going beyond our target velocity of about 13-15 feet per second. If we're seeing anything beyond 1,400 feet per second, I'm going to be concerned with that because that's a sign that we're going way too far in terms of pressure. The other thing that we're going to be looking for is sticky extraction. So as these cases expand in the chambers, they're going to expand just above the web here. Now that's something that you're going to notice on regular 327 factory ammo, is that the cases will expand just above the web, and you'll be able to feel a little bump there. Now what we want is for that bump not to go beyond normal. When that bump expands too far, it's going to start sticking in the chamber, and we don't want that. So that was a little spiel on high pressure versus overpressure. Again, consult your reloading manual, and if you have somebody near you that can help you reload in person, I would always suggest that before you go out and start reloading by yourself. So let's take these out to the range and go shoot them in our Ruger SP101. Okay, we're back on the range, and we're going to chronograph the 100 grain XTP loads. And so the first one up we're going to try out is the 6.0, which is this one right here. So let's get these loaded up and chronograph them. I have got the iPad with the chronograph software on it, so it's going to do all of the math for us. Okay, so let's eject these and look for pressure signs. So you can see some smokiness on the cases. Check out the primers here, and the primers are still nice and round. They haven't started flattening out at all. So we're going to continue on to the next one. Well, here's a good example of why you wear safety glasses when you're shooting. This just came back and hit me in the chest. This is the jacket off the last bullet I fired. It's still hot. So, safety PSA, wear your safety glasses. Accidents do happen. Okay, still looking a little bit smoky. We're not seeing any case expansion yet around the web. And the primers, they're starting to flatten out just a little bit, but we're still well within normal here. So we're going to continue on. We're still not quite to our target velocity. Okay, let's check these ones for pressure signs. Okay, now the smokiness is still there, just a hair, starting to go away. We're starting to see that slight bulge form above the web, but we're still not quite up to where it would be on factory rounds. Let's check the primers. Yep, primers are getting flat. We're starting to see signs of high pressure, but that's normal for the 327. High pressure is normal. So let's see if we can move on to the next one, see if we get any pressure signs on those. We're still not quite up to the target velocity. Okay, looking at these ones, the smoky cases have gone away. So we're starting to get into normal operating pressure. We're seeing the typical signs of high pressure, flattened primers, and that slight bulge above the case web. But nothing that looks excessive. This all looks like standard 327 ammo. Let's try it the next increment and see if we can get a little closer to the target velocity. Okay, that last round the smoky cases were gone. Primers were flat, so I think we're right at 327 operating pressure. Probably somewhere right around 40 to 42,000 psi. So we have one increment left. That's our max charge of 7.0. Let's see what these do. Okay, and that was our last 6. So let's take a look at these numbers for the 7.0 loading. Well, the iPad's decided to overheat, so let's get back inside and try to look at these numbers. The last 6 that we fired just fine, extracted just fine, and they do show the typical 327 high pressure on the primers. but nothing that looks unusual. I get the same kind of results from factory American Eagle ammo. So, like I said before, let's get inside, let the iPad cool down, and crunch the numbers. The load development that we did today was very successful. We copied Bufalo Bore's 100 grain heavy 327 loading. We got our 100 grain Hornady XTP up to the advertised velocity of just about 1,315 feet per second. We got within 1% of their advertised velocity. Reasons their velocity might have been a little bit higher. Well, they could be at higher altitude where the air is thinner. It could have been warmer on that day. There's a number of different things, but less than a 1% difference, that's good enough in my book. That's a perfect copy of their loading. If this is your first video that you watch from the Hughes Enterprise channel, please subscribe to see more like it. I'd like to give a big thank you to my Patreon supporters that helped to make this video possible. If you'd like to help support the channel and you're not a Patreon supporter already, there is a link in the description. Just a $1 donation every month goes a long way to producing more of these videos more often. Thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing.